Welcome to our second webinar in the Stay at Home, Play at Home series. I'm Caroline Same and I'm the founder and director of Developmental Play, and I want to share with you here what developmental play is, why it matters and how we can adapt it for children who are different learners. So what this webinar is going to do, it's going to explain to you why play matters, the foundation of why we're doing play. It's also going to show you how children develop through play, particularly pre-verbally. And we're going to tell you a little story of how developmental play came about and why it might be relevant for your organisation, and introduce you to the importance of stages, not ages, because very often we feel that children need to develop particular things at particular ages and following a trajectory. But we know that actually child's development is, even though it's incremental, often different skills develop at different stages. So we really want to focus on stages rather than ages. And particularly if this is for children who learn differently, it's helpful not to think about ages. We're also going to illustrate some of the stay-at-home, play-at-home resources and how you can adapt them for children who are learning in different ways. And all this will become evident through understanding the developmental play pyramid that we're going to show you in this webinar. Before I start about the theory, I wanted to tell you a little story about how developmental play came about. So I'm an occupational therapist and art therapist and an educator, and I've had over 35 years working in human development. And when I see a child, particularly if they're struggling in the way they're developing, I can see quite quickly, because of all this knowledge, what the child needs. Now, many years ago, I was invited by my dear friend and colleague, Carrie Clay, to go to India with her. We were working at Deep D Special School in rural India, which we now visit annually, and they are very dear friends of ours. The first time we went, I was asked to do a training. And when you're training, particularly through translators, you really have to think about what matters. What do I need to get across here? Because I've got so much knowledge and ideas and often a lot of big professional language that unless you're trained in it, gets lost, particularly in translation. So it was very humbling to try and think on my feet while training for the first time at Deep D. What do these parents who have no background like I do, and teachers who also aren't clinically trained like me, what do they need to know and what will help most? Now, I've been visiting Deep D for over 10 years now, and it's really made me think, what are the things that really matter to help children development? And what we really needed was a simple, true, best practice model to help adults support their children, particularly in low resourced areas. I laugh sometimes that I'm just about ready now, having had 3 children, studied child development twice and 35 years of experience. I think I'm just about ready to have my first child. I think I might know what I'm doing. I say it a bit in jest, but a lot of it is true. Nobody prepares us to raise our children. And how much more so if our child learns in a different way. So often I see parents who are desperate because their child isn't learning in the way they expect, and they don't know what to do. We felt we needed a model that helped give the best practice that top clinicians have, but made it accessible to everyone. And this is how the developmental play pyramid came about. It was trying to put into a simple diagram how children develop from the early stages up to what we expect to be seeing at about 4 to 5, what we call higher play. Very often when people talk about play, they're talking about higher play. They're talking about imagination, being able to do roles, being able to draw sophisticated pictures, being able to tell stories. Now, any of you who work with children who are different learners will know that very often they're a long way away from that. I'm a clinician, and a lot of the children who are referred to me come to me at 6, 7, 8 years old because they haven't got these skills. And if they haven't got these skills, why not? We need to understand how children develop what we call pre-verbally from, in utero and from the early developmental stages. So I'm just going to take you simply through this pyramid so that you begin to understand the framework, and then we're going to look at some of the stay-at-home, play-at-home resources and how they are relevant to the different stages of development. Now, the foundation stage you'll see in this pyramid is the sensory body play and the attachment safety play. So sensory body play is all about how children experience their bodies. It begins as soon as they're held, rocked, sung to, interacted with. It's about how they develop what we call sensory integration through all their senses. Now, we tend to only think about 5 senses: touch, taste, smell, vision and hearing. But actually, as occupational therapists, we look at 8 senses, and this ties in with the neurobiology of learning. And it's those 5 I mentioned, plus 3 what we call hidden senses. One is vestibular, which is about balance and about feeling grounded and about being able to sort of centralize everything in our core. Really important. If you've seen children who are wriggling, not able to sit still, are clumsy, they often have issues with their vestibular processing, with their vestibular sense. And then there's proprioception. This is feeling where your body is in space. I know when I put my arm behind my back where it is in space. Some children struggle with that. Very important to understand, and a lot of this is wired very early through our relationships and movements in early infancy. And then the 8th sense that's been added quite recently to the theory of sensory integration is the sense of interoception, understanding your internal body organs and their behaviour. An example of this is when a child is hungry, they often experience it as angry. They know something's wrong in their physical body, but they don't know what it is. And we often call this hangry. Children with core vestibular issues often express hunger as anger. So the senses are the foundations of all learning. And this is really important to understand if you work with different learners. If you work with children on the autistic spectrum, we know that sensory differences are one of the key indicators of a child on the autistic spectrum. It's foundation. So sensory body play, the play all around, hearing, seeing, integrating it with the way your body moves, understanding all those senses working together is the foundation of so much work. And it's before language develops. Now, you might have a child who's got good language, but if their sensory skills are all over the place, they're not going to be able to access learning in the way you expect. So this is why we've put sensory body play as one of the foundation skills on the developmental play pyramid. Again, you'll see in the stay-at-home, play-at-home resources which are the play activities graded at bottom of the pyramid, level 1. They're colour-coded on this free resource. Then we've got attachment and safety play. Now, this is more about the emotional well-being of the child. Children need to feel safe, and it's in early infancy that the carer makes them feel safe. So we want to look not only at the embodiment, not only at the physical body, but also the emotional, social body. Do children feel safe? Now, often children who have sensory issues do not feel safe, and so you see behaviour of meltdowns or clinginess or something like that. So these are the foundations you need to understand. Level 1. A lot of the stay-at-home, play-at-home programme we're recommending to you is about helping build positive attachment, helping the child feel safe on many different levels. It's a foundation skill, really important to understand. So that's level 1 of the developmental play pyramid. Level 2 is when children have integrated those senses, they feel safe and they begin to explore the world, creative exploration. They begin to make a mess on their table with their food. They begin to move into the world and explore it. They're little explorers, and this is the beginning of independence. A lot of the play at this stage is cause and effect. Oh, I make a splash in the water, I see it, I'm excited. Level 2 of the play pyramid is all about engagement, realizing they can have some control on their world. It's physical, but it's also emotional and social, but it's through exploration. Cause and effect. Level 3 of the pyramid is what I call meaning-making play. Now, this is when children have explored the environment around them and they're beginning to form hypotheses from it. They're beginning to order, to sequence, to pattern, to have what we often talk about, different circles of communication. They see, it gives them a message back into their brain, they respond, it comes back in again, they do it. It's these more complex playfulness. And this is how you begin to wire symbolic thought. Now, level 1, level 2 and level 3 of the pyramid are all pre-verbal. They are often before language develops in the child. This is relevant because if you're working with children who don't have language, they need lots of this play. They need to revisit it. This is how you wire the brain for understanding concepts and language and higher thought. And then once you're doing that, you get up into what we call higher play, level 4. This is understanding roles, understanding social rules, being able to imagine, being able to create worlds, language. We've put lots of fun creative activities in our packs for level 4. This is the play that we as adults remember. What we don't tend to remember is how we learned to play at that level. So this is why the developmental play pyramid is really helpful and really important for you if you're working with diverse and different learners. So our stay-at-home, play-at-home resources, I'm just going to take you through a few of them and how you might consider adapting these resources if you're working with different learners. We really recommend you look at the developmental play pyramid. We've got lots of resources and literature on our website that I'll put at the end of this webinar. And I really recommend you read the article on one of our blogs that came out in a US journal in January about the model, just to revisit some of what I'm saying. But let's look first at, say, Playdough. Now, Playdough can take you from level 1 of the pyramid, sensory body play, and safety, all the way up to level 4. So if you're making your own Playdough following this recipe, initially it's early sensory play. It's just splashing in the water, helping the child feel safe with the cause and effect of water. I was playing with a little child who has issues with getting dirty the other day, and initially we were playing with water, and as soon as it splashed, she froze. And we just made it more playful. I added animals to it, we did a song with it, and before she knew it, she was playing with water, she was splashing it everywhere. We then were able to introduce a little bit of flour, and that mixed in, and oh, look at the bubbles. And so they explore different textures, they're getting a little bit higher level, and then you begin to make it sticky, and then you begin to make it doughy, and then, so creative exploration is the stickiness, meaning making is when it begins to create form, level 3, and then once you've got a lump of Play-Doh, you're able to make it into a shape or a form. You can make a little figure, level 4. So Play-Doh is a lovely sensory initially, but then going into higher thought through the different stages. And that's why we put the Play-Doh recipe as number 1 in our stay-at-home, play-at-home, because it's so versatile and can be used at different levels. If you're working with different learners, don't rush them through the levels. Sometimes they need to do water play again and again and again before they feel safety. The next exercise I just wanted to show you was body play on the bed. Now you can see in the image here on this slide that the child is balanced on the parent's legs. Now what you're doing here, you've got the knees stabilizing the child's core. You've got the parent holding the child's hands and looking into their eyes. This is sensory body play and attachment safety play. As soon as the child gets scared, the parent should be able to register it in the eyes and keep them safe. We must never scare a child through play, because that will, if you saw my early webinar about the neurobiology of play, that will push them back into their reptilian brain of fight, flight, freeze. So this body play on the bed is very much about foundation movements, very important for vestibular. You can move them left to right, front to back, It's very playful, but it's really building core and stability, helps them feel grounded. So that's a little example of really strong body play. Now I'm going to just show you one of my favourite level 4 activities, and this is the Create a Superhero Shield. You can do this with recycled cardboard. All the ideas are on the slide here. But bear in mind, this kind of activity, you need to be at the higher play level. Children need to be able to think symbolically. So if you've got a child who's struggling with cognitive skills, this might be a little bit high. Think through where your child might be. But you might be able to help them move from the meaning making level 3 into it being a more symbolic, imaginative play. But in this superhero shield, they make a shield. It's all about self-esteem, identity, protection, being able to make symbols and decorate it, colour recognition, all these kind of things. And then bubbles, just as one final activity, is another activity, a bit like the Play-Doh, that you can grade from 1, level 1, can they blow? Children generally love bubbles, and you can make them with washing up liquid, or if you've got commercial ones, great. Blowing, really important for regulation and focus and breathing. A lot of children who are different learners, particularly if they have core issues, very often do not have deep enough breathing. And then we wonder why they're so easily upset, why they have such low energy or things like that. Often it's because they're not engaging the diaphragm, they're not breathing deeply. So we can increase sensory awareness and sensory skills through being able to blow bubbles, and also regulation skills. Short breath in, low out. It's really calming. It impacts on the vagal nerve, the vagal system. Then we can get children to explore it more by being able to pop. Level 2 of the pyramid, popping bubbles. Level 3, maybe being able to pop it with your knee, pop it with your elbow, pop it with your nose, pop 3, pop 2. So they're beginning to make meaning, and you're raising them up the higher skills. And then level 4 might be actually telling a story. Choose a bubble. Does it go on a story? Where does it go? What colours are we? Should we give it a name? Can you show me what a bubble looks like? So that you take it to a much higher level. But these are just little ideas of how you can use these resources. Think about the play level of your child and adapt these resources accordingly. In this short webinar, I hope I'm just giving you ideas that can help you think creatively for how you can use these stay-at-home, play-at-home resources and adapt them for children who are working at different stages and learning at different stages. What are some of the skills to help you adapt these activities for different learners? First, look at how these children use their bodies. Are they constant wrigglers? Are they children who need big movements? I believe children are telling us things all the time. It's just very often as adults we've forgotten how to listen, because we've forgotten what those early 3 developmental stages felt like, because often it's before memories really been laid down. Most of us can remember playing at level 4, but a lot of infant play is before we've developed symbolic memory and verbal memory, so we can't access it. But it's really important to work with it. So observe how children's bodies and senses used. Are they scared of big noises? Are they constant movers? These kind of things are really important. And if you can understand what kind of sensory profile they have, so you go back to those 8 senses: sight, smell, taste, vision, hearing, sense of balance, vestibular, sense of your body in space, proprioception, and sense of understanding your internal organs. And generally, children will either be oversensitive to one sense if they've got a challenge, or under-responsive. So these are just 2 key things to try and remember when you're looking at your child to try and understand how they might work. Understand their sensory profile as much as possible. This is what occupational therapists are trained to do, and it's an approach called sensory integration. But all of you, whether you're parents or teachers, the more you can understand how children learn through their senses, read what they're telling you through their behaviour, the better you're going to be at designing and using these play activities to meet the children's needs. Don't force them to do things they don't like. I always say, look in their eyes. Where is their joy? Children tell us when we're meeting their developmental needs because there's joy in their eyes. I say this all the time when I'm training practitioners and parents. We've got it. He feels good about his body. It's working together now. Follow the joy. Play is joyful. Follow the child's playful joy, and you'll be giving them what they need, particularly if they are diverse learners challenged with different sensory profiles. The other thing to do is to think about, what do they play the most? Now, quite often we try and stop children doing what they do most, but children play for a reason. So if they're doing repetitive lining up play, it means it's meeting some kind of need. If they're stuck in it, we want to scaffold, we want to build and help them move on from there. But if we stop them, that's their safety play. That's predictable. That means they've got some control, and it's actually telling us that a lot of the other things around them they can't control, and maybe they're a bit scared. So if we play with that, lining things up with them, and then maybe add a little new element to it in a playful way, watching their eyes to see if they're engaging, often we can help them develop play through that way. Also, what do they avoid, and what does that tell you? So if children really can't bear anything sticky, the worst thing you can do is put paint on their hand and help them make a handprint, hand over hand. I wouldn't like it. Why do we think children would like it? If a child is avoiding mess, it means that they are probably oversensitive to touch, to that sticky, tacky thing. So the last thing we want to do is to traumatize them by forcing them into it. But maybe we can start with water play, a little bit of splashing. I've given you a lovely activity as well called melting ice cubes, and I put this one in because I was working a few years ago with a child who really didn't like touching anything, and this was an issue in schoolwork, it was an issue in getting them to try different foods, it was an issue in getting them dressed because they were tactilely defensive to any label that tickled them and things. He needed to feel in control of his sense of touch. And I knew he could tolerate water. So we started just with simple water play. And he liked hot and cold things. He was always touching cold doorknobs or metal things. I noted that and I thought, okay, let's try ice cubes. So I just sent him to see if he could tolerate holding a simple ice cube. And he quite enjoyed that. He didn't throw it away or anything. So then I added paint to the ice cubes. And he could tolerate holding that until he began to see it had colour, and then he dropped it in the water and then watched it melt, and I made lots of excited sounds of wow, look at that, and suddenly he was playing with coloured water and watching the ice cubes melt. Within a week he was playing with paint. He was a 5-year-old, this little boy. Within 3 weeks he was doing art and craft at school. He'd never done anything sensorily tactile like that before. So watch what they avoid, read it, go gently, follow their lead, and you can help children develop more acceptance and strength in their sensory systems. So some of the top tips for using developmental play, really with all learners, as I've just mentioned. I believe that children know what they need to do. We need to support them, mirror it, affirm it, strengthen it, and help them move on to the next stage by giving them the next opportunities, by reading their cues. Observe them, be the watchers, see them. They'll respond beautifully to being seen and mirrored back. That strengthens the neuron pathways in children. Really important for children on the autistic spectrum, really important for children who've had trauma to feel seen and validated. So listen as much as you can to the language of play, and we developed the developmental play pyramid to try and help give you a checklist for understanding the language of play. Also, it's very important, there are no rights and wrongs in play. There are rights and wrongs in maths, there are rights and wrongs in the way you form a letter, but in play there shouldn't be. And it's so important, particularly for emotional development, that we give children free rein to explore. Obviously you need a few little rules that, there's no hitting and no hurting, but often we put far too many rules on as adults. It's back to safety, no hitting, don't break anyone, don't hurt your friends, but this is a place for having fun. Affirm children. Doesn't matter if the mask they make has 15 eyes. I see, your mask's got lots of eyes and so many colours. We should not follow templates. That kills creativity, it kills play, it kills children's natural creative exploration. The other thing, just finally, and I'm going to read you a little story about this in a minute from my book, Fighting the Dragon, Finding the Self. But be prepared for the magic of play, particularly if you work with children with special needs and children who've experienced some kind of trauma, because play is transformative. And I'm going to read you this little story from my book called Creating Her World, Her Way. Poppy is a 5-year-old girl who's socially quite withdrawn and nervous. She's startled by loud noises, fiddles a lot with small items like beads and tissues, and hates having her hair washed in the bath. So much so her parents dread bath time, when she will have major meltdowns and will kick and bite anyone who tries to get her in the bath. Poppy does not have much speech and her play is very limited for her age. Her parents worry about her. She is isolated at school and so unlike her younger sister, who is cheerful, boisterous and fearless. Poppy is sent to see a therapist as her language isn't developing. She barely connects with other people socially, and her parents hope that with extra support she'll catch up with her sister and be able to join in more with family and school life. Poppy sees her therapist once a week for a year in a creative playroom and a colourful sensory gym. The therapist allows Poppy to lead the sessions and watches and supports her as she plays in the gym and the playroom. The therapist doesn't structure or teach Poppy, but instead allows her to explore things at her own pace. This delights Poppy. Since she was at preschool, there has always been so much going on and so much structured play that she couldn't keep up with, so she preferred just to shut down and stay silent. Here, though, she is allowed to play with sand and make a mess with water and shaving foam. She explores creating worlds in the playroom, and she swings, jumps and learns to understand her body more in the sensory gym. Within 6 months, Poppy is more confident and starting to form more words and communicates better. Once her parents understand how sensitive and disturbed she is by the sensation of water on her head, and Poppy feels she's in control of some of her own inner world, bath time becomes easier. After 1 year, Poppy is transformed. She'll always be a sensitive child and a little introverted, but now she's a more confident, happier child, ready to move into the demands of primary school. I see many, many children who are transformed by play. I believe it totally, and often it's magically quick. As a therapist and a teacher, I've often been taught that I've got to do things to the child. No, we need to let the children play, but we need to understand too how they need to play. And that is what the developmental play pyramid is all about. So if you want to find out more, you can log on to the Facebook page to find out and access all the stay-at-home, play-at-home resources. We also have an online parenting course at our academy, www.createcatacademy.com. Please also check out our website, www.developmentalplay.com. Subscribe to our members list. There's lots of resources about why play matters from global experts all around the world as well. So please join our community, consider training at our academy. You can contact us via our websites and our academy. And most of all, be playful. Let's bring out the best of all our children through play. Play matters, particularly in these times. Thank you for listening.